We're building a future America full of possibilities, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. Investing in all America and all Americans to make sure everyone has a fair shot, where we leave nobody behind. Our plan is working, and America's coming back. That's America.
Arizona, the electoral frontier. In 2020, Biden carried it, but now the polls suggest Donald Trump could derail him here. Conventional wisdom suggests economics decides these elections, and this is one of the places where, following COVID and a downturn, the president has got this juggernaut of an economy moving again. This is the site for a new gigafactory making batteries for vehicles and power storage.
Over here, we've just got done with all the grading, all the underground utilities. That's all been put in. We're just probably 2 weeks away from finishing grading. So it's 214 acres.
Biden has used massive economic stimulus to incentivize the building of new plants, particularly in the battery and microchip sectors. And this site is just one example of dozens now across the country.
So it is important, and we got conditional approval from the DOE for $850 million, and so we're still working through all that. But it is important. But we could do fundraising on our own if we needed to. So that's always a possibility to keep the project going.
Renewable energy is another beneficiary of recent government stimulus. It's all part of the biggest industrial strategy for decades. But political opponents have focused on some of the negative consequences.
You'd think these policies, which have brought high employment and economic growth, would bring popularity for Joe Biden. But there are downsides. The cost of the stimulus has added to the national debt. The economy, in certain ways, is overheating, generating inflation with all that involves, and some would say, particularly in this state, driving more illegal migration.
You might assume boosting US production of items like microchips would have been a Trump policy, but at a press conference by MAGA firebrand Carrie Lake, who's contesting a Senate seat in November, we heard the downsides.
Everybody making a paycheck right now is struggling greatly. That paycheck is not going as far as it used to because of Joe Biden's Bidenflation. We have a lot of issues here in Arizona that kind of permeate across the country. Obviously, first and foremost, our wide open border. And so we have to do something, and we have to do something serious to get this border under control. This is one of the reasons I'm running for the United States Senate. We need to get to D.C. and actually start protecting our citizens.
For Democrats hoping to carry Arizona, the claim that the Biden stimulus has boosted illegal migration is not easy to combat. It's a complication of being the incumbent.
The immigration system is not functioning well. The immigration laws have not been updated for decades, and that includes the asylum system, which is not functioning adequately at the border. It's disorderly and it's broken. On the other hand, the United States has always been a beacon.
I'm wondering whether it's one of those issues, and maybe as well as inflation, where the administration is kind of judged on its record, but those considerations don't really seem to be applied to Donald Trump by his supporters.
Correct. He is a cult figure among his supporters, and the cult leader can do no wrong. You know, that's not every Republican, but for the people who are down the rabbit hole for Donald Trump, the facts don't matter. January 6th never happened. Some of it is religious fervor. They think he's the second coming of Christ. It's a very odd phenomena.
A night of unrest at Arizona State University after pro-Palestinian protesters refused to leave campus.
And if attacks on the right were predictable, the campus protests of recent weeks have presented a challenge to Biden from the opposite end of the political spectrum. Arizona State was one of those campuses where students followed the example of Colombia's occupation. Among those we spoke to a few hours before the camp was broken up was not just support for Palestinians, but a desire to make the president pay for his backing of Israel.
Back in 2020, it was my first time voting. I voted for Biden because I felt like I had no other choice. It's either vote for Biden, the lesser of two evils, or vote for Trump. And at the time, as a daughter of two undocumented immigrants, I thought that was my only choice. And now, for the past 6 months, I made the decision that I will not be voting for Biden.
So will the view among demonstrators be shared more widely among young electors? Many Democrats sense they're vulnerable on this.
Do you, though, on the point of President Biden's support for Israel, do you regret it? Do you think he could have been more even-handed or put more pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think he could have. I think I know that he's put private pressure on Netanyahu, and probably it would have been better had that pressure been more open. I'm someone who believes in the right of Israel to exist. Not everyone does, but I do, and the president does. That being said, Netanyahu's conduct of the war has not been appropriate in some cases. I mean, the devastation of civilians in Gaza is inexplicable and unacceptable. And I think a majority of Democrats in the House feel that way.
It's still many months until voting. The Gaza issue may ebb, but the wider questions for young people on the left here are unlikely to.
I do believe that we need to have a Gen Z wave, if you will, of people coming into power. We have a lot of young people in power right now, and they need to rise up and be president, run for higher offices, because we need that wave so that we stop having these old white men in power to A, control women's bodies, B, don't take police brutality seriously, don't take systemic racism seriously.
And this brings us north to Philadelphia and a warship launched in the same year that Joe Biden was born.
The elephant, or indeed battleship, in the room with Joe Biden is his age. The White House insists that he's got judgment and the depth of enormous experience. But there's no doubt about it, there's a big part of the American electorate who feel that just as this fine old ship was pensioned off from the fleet in 1991, Mr. Biden's time is past.
The New Jersey is a museum ship now, in dry dock for maintenance. But for the 81-year-old president, the toughest battle is yet to come.
Well, obviously, it's a big hurdle. I mean, I think that if this were a normal election, by the way, I think if this were a normal election, Biden wouldn't be running. I think he already would have stepped back. I think he's running because he believes he's the only plausible candidate, and I don't think he's unaware of his weaknesses as a candidate either, but he is the only plausible candidate right now. I think that Biden is a weak candidate, but this is an existential crisis for the country.
It used to be a cast iron rule of Washington politics that being the incumbent was an advantage. With inflation and tough economic times, that's far less clear.
Add to the calculations that unique Trump effect, where his own base blame all of his failures in office on other people, while denying the Biden administration any of its achievements, and it's clear that the stage is set for a most unusual election.
During the coming months, both sides will go all out to mobilize their voters. And for Biden supporters, there's the nagging worry that they've not yet done enough to hold on to the White House.